King Solomon's Mines by L. Rider Haggard. Chapter 8. We Enter Kukuanaland. All that afternoon we travelled along the magnificent roadway, which trended steadily in the northwesterly direction. Infadoos and Scragga walked with us, but their followers marched about 100 paces ahead. "Infadoos," I said at length, "who made this road?" "It was made, my lord, of old time. None know how or when, not even the wise woman Gagool, who has lived for generations. We are not old enough to remember its making. None can fashion such roads now, but the king suffers no grass to grow upon it." "And whose are the writings on the wall of the caves through which we have passed on the road?" I asked, referring to the Egyptian-like sculptures that we had seen. "My lord, the hands that made the road wrote the wonderful writings. We know not who wrote them." "When did the Kukuana people come into this country?" "My lord, the race came down here like the breath of a storm 10,000 moons ago, from the great lands which lie there beyond," and he pointed to the north. "They could travel no further because of the high mountains which ring in the land. So say the old voices of our fathers that have descended to us the children, and so says Gagool the wise woman, the smeller out of witches." And again he pointed to the snow-clad peaks. "The country, too, was good, so they settled here, and grew strong and powerful, and now our numbers are like the sea sand. And when Twala the king calls up his regiments, their plumes cover the plain so far as the eye of man can reach." "And if the land is walled in with mountains, who is there for the regiments to fight with?" "Nay, my lord, the country is open there towards the north, and now and again warriors sweep down upon us in clouds from a land we know not, and we slay them. It is the third part of the life of a man since there was a war. Many thousands died in it, but we destroyed those who came to eat us up. So since then there has been no war." "Your warriors must grow weary of resting on their spears, Infadoos." "My lord, there was one war just after we destroyed the people that came down upon us, but it was a civil war. Dog ate dog." "How was that?" "My lord the king, my half-brother, had a brother born at the same birth and of the same woman. It is not our custom, my lord, to suffer twins to live. The weaker always must die. But the mother of the king hid away the feeble child, which was born the last, for her heart yearned over it, and that child is Twala the king. I am his younger brother, born of another wife." "Well?" "My lord, Kafa, our father, died when we came to manhood, and my brother Imotu was made king in his place, and for a space reigned and had a son by his favourite wife. When the babe was 3 years old, just after the great war, during which no man could sow or reap, a famine came upon the land, and the people murmured because of the famine, and looked round like a starved lion for something to rend. Then it was that Gagool, the wise and terrible woman who does not die, made a proclamation to the people, saying, 'The king Imotu is no king.' And at the time Imotu was sick with a wound and lay in his kraal, not able to move. Then Gagool went into a hut and led out Twala, my half-brother and twin brother to the king, whom she had hidden among the caves and rocks since he was born, and stripping the moocha waistcloth off his loins, showed the people of the Kukuanas the mark of the sacred snake coiled round his middle, wherewith the eldest son of the king is marked at birth, and cried out loud, 'Behold your king whom I have saved for you even to this day.' Now the people, being mad with hunger and altogether bereft of reason and the knowledge of truth, cried out, The king! The king! But I knew that it was not so, for Imotu my brother was the elder of the twins, and our lawful king. Then, just as the tumult was at its height, Imotu the king, though he was very sick, crawled from his hut, holding his wife by the hand, and followed by his little son Ignosi, that is, by interpretation, the lightning. "What is this noise?" he asked. "Why cry ye, 'The king, the king'?" Then Twala, his twin brother, born of the same woman and in the same hour, ran to him, and taking him by the hair, stabbed him through the heart with his knife. And the people, being fickle and ever ready to worship the rising sun, clapped their hands and cried, "Twala is king! Now we know that Twala is king!" "And what became of Imotu's wife and her son Ignosi? Did Twala kill them too?" "Nay, my lord. When she saw that her lord was dead, the queen seized the child with a cry and ran away. 2 days afterwards she came to a kraal very hungry, and none would give her milk or food now that her lord the king was dead, for all men hate the unfortunate. But at nightfall a little child, a girl, crept out and brought her corn to eat, and she blessed the child, and went on towards the mountains with her boy before the sun rose again. And there she must have perished, for none have seen her since, nor the child Ignosi." "Then if this child Ignosi had lived, he would be the true king of the Kukuana people?" "That is so, my lord. The sacred snake is round his middle. If he lives, he is king. But alas, he is long dead." "See, my lord," and Infadoos pointed to a vast collection of huts surrounded by a fence, which was in its turn encircled by a great ditch that lay on the plain beneath us. "That is the kraal where the wife of Imotu was last seen with the child Ignosi. It is there that we shall sleep tonight, if indeed," he added doubtfully, "my lords sleep at all upon this earth." "When we are among the Kukuanas, my good friend Infadoos, we do as the Kukuanas do," I said majestically, and turned round quickly to address Good, who was tramping along sullenly behind, his mind fully occupied with unsatisfactory attempts to prevent his flannel shirt from flapping in the evening breeze. To my astonishment I butted into Umbopa, who was walking along immediately behind me, and very evidently had been listening with the greatest interest to my conversation with Infadoos. The expression on his face was most curious, and gave me the idea of a man who was struggling with partial success to bring something long forgotten back into his mind. All this while we had been pressing on at a good rate towards the undulating plain beneath us. The mountains we had crossed now loomed high above our heads, and Sheba's breasts were veiled modestly in diaphanous wreaths of mist. As we went the country grew more and more lovely. The vegetation was luxuriant without being tropical. The sun was bright and warm, but not burning, and a gracious breeze blew softly along the odorous slopes of the mountain. Indeed, this new land was little less than an earthly paradise. In beauty, in natural wealth, and in climate I have never seen its like. The Transvaal is a fine country, but it is nothing to Kukuanaland. So soon as we started, Infadoos had dispatched a runner to warn the people of the kraal, which, by the way, was in his military command, of our arrival. This man had departed at an extraordinary speed, which Infadoos informed me he would keep up all the way, as running was an exercise much practised among his people. The result of this message now became apparent. When we arrived within 2 miles of the kraal, we could see that company after company of men were issuing from its gates and marching towards us. Sir Henry laid his hand upon my arm, and remarked that it looked as though we were going to meet with a warm reception. Something in his tone attracted Infadoos's attention. "Let not my lords be afraid," he said hastily, "for in my breast there dwells no guile. This regiment is one under my command, and comes out by my orders to greet you." I nodded easily, though I was not quite easy in my mind. About half a mile from the gates of this kraal is a long stretch of rising ground sloping gently upward from the road, and here the companies formed. It was a splendid sight to see them, each company about 300 strong, charging swiftly up the rise, with flashing spears and waving plumes, to take their appointed places. By the time we reached the slope 12 such companies, or in all 3,600 men, had passed out and taken up their positions along the road. Presently we came to the first company, and were able to gaze in astonishment on the most magnificent set of warriors that I have ever seen. They were all men of mature age, mostly veterans of about 40, and not one of them was under 6 feet in height, whilst many stood 6 feet 3 or 4. They wore upon their heads heavy black plumes of sakaboola feathers, like those which adorned our guides. About their waists and beneath the right knees were bound circlets of white ox-tails, while in their left hands they carried round shields measuring about 20 inches across. These shields are very curious. The framework is made of an iron plate beaten out thin, over which is stretched milk-white ox-hide. The weapons that each man bore were simple but most effective, consisting of a short and very heavy 2-edged spear with a wooden shaft, the blade being about 6 inches across at the widest part. These spears are not used for throwing, but, like the Zulu bangwan, or stabbing assegai, are for close quarters only, when the wound inflicted by them is terrible. In addition to his bangwan, every man carried 3 large and heavy knives, each knife weighing about 2 pounds. One knife was fixed in the ox-tail girdle, and the other 2 at the back of the round shield. These knives, which are called tolas by the Kukuanas, take the place of the throwing assegai of the Zulus. The Kukuana warriors can cast them with great accuracy to a distance of 50 yards, and it is their custom on charging to hurl a volley of them at the enemy as they come to close quarters. Each company remained still as a collection of bronze statues till we were opposite to it, when, at a signal given by its commanding officer, who, distinguished by a leopard-skin cloak, stood some paces in front, every spear was raised into the air, and from 300 throats sprang forth with a sudden roar the royal salute of "Kum!" Then, so soon as we had passed, the company formed up behind us and followed us towards the kraal, till at last the whole regiment of the Greys, so called from their white shields, the crack troops of the Kukuana people, was marching in our rear with a tread that shook the ground. At length, branching off from Solomon's Great Road, we came to the wide fosse surrounding the kraal, which is at least a mile round, and fenced with a strong palisade of piles formed of the trunks of trees. At the gateway this fosse is spanned by a primitive drawbridge, which was let down by the guard to allow us to pass in. The kraal is exceedingly well laid out. Through the centre runs a wide pathway intersected at right angles by other pathways, so arranged as to cut the huts into square blocks, each block being the quarters of a company. The huts are dome-shaped and built, like those of the Zulus, of a framework of wattle, beautifully thatched with grass, but unlike the Zulu huts, they have doorways through which men could walk. Also they are much larger, and surrounded by a verandah about 6 feet wide, beautifully paved with powdered lime trodden hard. All along each side of this wide pathway that pierces the kraal were ranged hundreds of women brought out by curiosity to look at us. These women, for a native race, are exceedingly handsome. They are tall and graceful, and their figures are wonderfully fine. The hair, though short, is rather curly than woolly. the features are frequently aquiline, and the lips are not unpleasantly thick, as is the case among most African races. But what struck us most was their exceedingly quiet and dignified air. They were as well bred in their way as the habitués of a fashionable drawing-room, and in this respect they differ from Zulu women and their cousins the Masai, who inhabit the district beyond Zanzibar. Their curiosity had brought them out to see us, but they allowed no rude expressions of astonishment or savage criticism to pass their lips as we trudged wearily in front of them. Not even when old Infadoos, with a surreptitious motion of the hand, pointed out the crowning wonder of poor Good's beautiful white legs, did they suffer the feeling of intense admiration which evidently mastered their minds to find expression. They fixed their dark eyes upon this new and snowy loveliness, for, as I think I have said, Good's skin is exceedingly white, and that was all, but it was quite enough for Good, who is modest by nature. When we reached the centre of the kraal, Infadoos halted at the door of a large hut, which was surrounded at a distance by a circle of smaller ones. "Enter, sons of the stars," he said in a magniloquent voice, "and deign to rest awhile in our humble habitations. A little food shall be brought to you, so that ye may have no need to draw your belts tight from hunger. Some honey and some milk, and an ox or two, and a few sheep. Not much, my lords, but still a little food." "It is good," said I. "Infadoos, we are weary with travelling through realms of air. Now let us rest." Accordingly we entered the hut, which we found amply prepared for our comfort. Couches of tanned skins were spread for us to lie on, and water was placed for us to wash in. Presently we heard a shouting outside, and stepping to the door saw a line of damsels bearing milk and roasted mealies and honey in a pot. Behind these were some youths driving a fat young ox. We received the gifts, and then one of the young men drew the knife from his girdle and dexterously cut the ox's throat. In 10 minutes it was dead, skinned and jointed. The best of the meat was then cut off for us, and the rest, in the name of our party, I presented to the warriors round us, who took it and distributed the white lord's gift. Umbopa set to work, with the assistance of an extremely prepossessing young woman, to boil our portion in a large earthenware pot over a fire which was built outside the hut, and when it was nearly ready we sent a message to Infadoos and asked him and Scragga, the king's son, to join us. Presently they came, and sitting down upon little stools, of which there were several about the hut, for the Kukuanas do not in general squat upon their haunches like the Zulus, they helped us to get through our dinner. The old gentleman was most affable and polite, but it struck me that the young one regarded us with doubt. Together with the rest of the party, he had been overawed by our white appearance and our magic properties, but it seemed to me that, on discovering that we ate, drank, and slept like other mortals, his awe was beginning to wear off, and to be replaced by a sullen suspicion, which made me feel rather uncomfortable. In the course of our meal, Sir Henry suggested to me that it might be well to try to discover if our hosts knew anything of his brother's fate, or if they had ever seen or heard of him. But on the whole I thought it would be wiser to say nothing of the matter at this time. It was difficult to explain a relative lost from the stars. After supper we produced our pipes and lit them, a proceeding which filled Infadoos and Scragga with astonishment. The Kukuanas were evidently unacquainted with the divine delights of tobacco smoke. The herb is grown among them extensively, but, like the Zulus, they use it for snuff only, and quite fail to identify it in its new form. Presently I asked Infadoos when we were to proceed on our journey, and was delighted to learn that preparations had been made for us to leave on the following morning, messengers having already departed to inform Twala the king of our coming. It appeared that Twala was at his principal place, known as Loo, making ready for the great annual feast which was to be held in the first week of June. At this gathering all the regiments, with the exception of certain detachments left behind for garrison purposes, are brought up and paraded before the king, and the great annual witch hunt, of which more by and by, is held. We were to start at dawn, and Infadoos, who was to accompany us, expected that we should reach Loo on the night of the second day, unless we were detained by accident or by swollen rivers. When they had given us this information, our visitors bade us good night, and having arranged to watch turn about, 3 of us flung ourselves down and slept the sweet sleep of the weary, whilst the 4th sat up on the lookout for possible treachery. End of chapter 8.